Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ Envy, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the God. We are the Breakfast Club. We got a special guest in the building.
Yes, indeed.
Byron Allen. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning. First of all, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. No. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan. You do amazing work, and I really appreciate you so much. So it's an honor to be here.
Who is Byron Allen for people who may not be familiar?
Who is Byron Allen? That's a great question. I'm trying to figure that out myself. You know what? I'm really blessed in so many ways.
Don't make me pull up your celebrity net worth to let people know exactly how blessed you are.
You know what? Those blessings, when I think about how great America is when I think about just my simple story. Mm-hmm. My mother got pregnant with me when she was 16 years old.
Wow.
And she had me 17 days after her 17th birthday.
Wow.
So in Michigan, right? Detroit?
In Detroit, Michigan. So here I am, born April 22nd, 1961, a little black baby, born without civil rights. You wouldn't bet on that baby, and you wouldn't bet on that 17-year-old little girl. And I was just fortunate, to have such a great mother. And the Detroit riots came about when Martin Luther King was assassinated. I was 7 years old. I was playing in the streets, and I'll never forget the moment they killed him. And my mother and my grandmother, they just screamed like I've never seen them scream before. They killed him. They killed him. And within 5 minutes, I was looking down the barrel of a tank. Next thing I know, troops were walking on the lawn, bayonets, dogs, and the military took over our neighborhood.
Was that to prevent any riots from happening?
That was just to squash the riots, because
Wow.
they knew they were going to kick off. Over 100-watt riots kicked off when they assassinated Martin Luther King. And they went in there and they just were in place and squashed it. And it was basically, if you are on the streets after dark, we're going to shoot you. We're going to kill you. And no questions asked. Curfew. Boom. So my mother and I decided to go to L.A. and visit some family in summer of '68 and some friends. And 2-week vacation. And ended up staying. And slept on a lot of sofas, a lot of floors, and good grace of God, just kind of sofa surfed for a while. And my mother ended up getting into UCLA. And she went to UCLA and got her master's degree in cinema TV production.
Oh, wow. So it's in your blood.
And so that was, I'll be the first to say, if the mothers succeed, so will the children. And if the mothers fail, most likely, so will the children. So because my mother was at UCLA and getting her master's degree in cinema TV production, she went to NBC and said, "Can I get a job?" And they said no. And her persistence really paid off. She asked a very important question. She asked a question that changed our lives. She asked, "Do you have an internship?" And they said no. And then she went to the next question. "Will you start one with me?" And they said yes.
Wow.
Game changer. And my mom ended up being an intern at NBC and then later a tour guide. And then later she went on to become a publicist in the marketing department at NBC. And because she was a tour guide and we couldn't afford childcare, I would go out to NBC with her and I would sit and wait for her to get off work and I would just watch Johnny Carson do The Tonight Show.
Wow.
And I watched Red Fox do Sanford and Son and Flip Wilson do The Flip Wilson Show and Richard Pryor do his specials. And Freddie Prinze do Chico and the Man. And then I would go and watch an unknown sportscaster do the local news, Bryant Gumbo. And then I watched an unknown weatherman do the weather, Pat Sajak, before the Today Show and before Wheel of Fortune. And I just went from studio to studio to studio, and I thought, what a wonderful way to go through life, making people laugh, making television, and entertaining the world. And this is what I'm going to do with my life. And all of that is because of education. My mother getting in there and opening that door, and that's amazing. It changes it just changes the paradigm instantly.
I wonder what inspired her to want to go to school.
You know what? She always knew education was the way, and she said, "Let's go." And before that, we were in Detroit, and my daddy worked at Ford Motor Company a little over 30 years, and my granddaddy worked at Great Lakes Steel a little over 30 years, and these were just unbelievable men. Right? Never called in a day sick, ever. Got to work. My granddaddy got to work an hour early every day and taught himself how to read. and drank bad coffee every day and didn't even know it. And these guys were trying to figure out how to put 36 hours in a 24-hour day. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to the factory with them. And it was just a game changer to see how television was made. So I started doing stand-up comedy when I was about 13, 14 years old.
That's how I got first introduced to you as a comedian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I started when I was a kid because of watching Red Fox and Johnny Carson and all of these comedians. And I said, you know what, I'm going to start doing stand-up. And I went to the Comedy Store and did my routine. And a guy saw me, a terrific guy named Wayne Klein. He saw me and he said, who wrote those jokes? And I said, I did. He said, I know somebody who might be interested in writing with you. I said, all right. Gave him my phone number. And I got a call like a week or two later. And this guy calls me up. He goes, let me speak to Byron.
J.J. Walker.
There it is. I go, this is Byron. He goes, this Byron. I go, yeah. He goes, my man Wayne Klein says you're funny. So if my man Wayne Klein says you're funny, you must be funny. I said, oh, thank you. He goes, you want to come write some jokes with us? I go, all right, let me ask my mom. And he was like, oh, he's got to ask his mom. So I started writing jokes with Jimmy J.J. Walker. I went to his apartment. I was 14 years old. And in his living room.
What kind of apartment did he have? Did it look like the Good Times apartment, or was he making money?
He was making money.
Okay.
He was hotter than the sun. He was on Good Times, #1 show. He was lighting it up. And I go into his apartment. Sitting there is David Letterman, who had just driven out from Indianapolis in a red pickup truck because he didn't think he was going to make it and he wanted to drive home. And Jay Leno, who was sleeping in his car.
Wow.
And they were getting $200 a week, and I got $25 a joke.
$25 a joke to write.
Yeah, so I sold my joke. I sold a joke to him. Mothers say the craziest things. This milk smells sour. Here, taste it. Boom. That was it. $25. And I was able to quit my paper out, and that was great because I was throwing the Herald Examiner, and I had to throw 2 newspapers to make a penny. And so I thought, okay, I've made it. And I started doing stand-up. And kept doing stand-up and kept writing. And I was really fortunate. I ended up being the youngest comedian on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And that went really well. And I remember standing behind the curtain. And I said, all right, the next 5 minutes here after he introduces me will change my life forever. And it went well. And I got a number of offers. And one of them was Real People, which ended up being the granddaddy of reality shows. And so Real People was amazing because it took me all over the country. And I was able to see America, and I mean small town America, where you don't have stoplights, and it's population 300 people. So that's how I got into the business. But before that, it was tough. I mean, it was with a single mother, and there was talk about her not being able to afford me, not being able to keep me, because things were tough. Money was really tight, and that clicked with me as a kid. So I started figuring out how to make money early on because my mother and father had gotten a divorce. And I felt like I pretty much lost my father in that divorce. And I wasn't about to lose my mother. So I said, I'm not going to let money be the reason why they say to her, you need to put him up for adoption. You need to put him in foster care or whatever it is. So I started making money. And I remember I was 10 years old. I went to the supermarket, Ralph's, La Brea and 3rd. And I went to the supermarket and I said, hey, can I get a job? And they said, how old are you? I said, I'm 10 years old. They said, you have to be at least 16 to work here, to bag groceries. I said, you have to be 16 to bag groceries? I go, well, how old is that guy right there bagging groceries? They said, he's 16 years old. I said, well, I'm 10 years old, and I know not to put eggs at the bottom of the bag. So why don't you give me a job?
Wow, you snitched?
Definitely snitched.
Snitch. Well, he was sitting there, and I'm like, this lady's going to come back and say, this kid messed up my eggs. Right? So they said, no, that's not going to work. So I was walking out of the store, and I saw this lady bringing a grocery basket back into the store. And I said, and I watched her take the basket and push it into this machine. And then the machine gave her a stamp. And I said, hey, lady, what is that? She goes, well, every time you put a grocery basket in this machine, you take it out of the parking lot because they don't want grocery baskets in the parking lot. You get a stamp. And if you get 100 stamps, you get $1 worth of food. So I just worked that parking lot.
Wow.
And I just kept putting baskets in that machine.
That's not loitering.
That's not loitering. It was
He's
there.
working.
I'm working. I'm putting baskets, and I'm coming home with food from my mother.
Wow.
And I'm saying, okay, here we go, Mama. You don't have to worry about feeding us. That's right. So you start hustling. That clicks right there. Like when somebody goes to your core and say, hey, you can't afford to keep your family, which is something that's very real today, because we're seeing mothers, single mothers who are struggling. Half the women in this country are living at or below the poverty line. And we're seeing them struggle to try and keep food on the table. And the government's taking them away because of that. I've seen that. I've come too close to that. I have tasted that abyss. So,
That's what drives people to a life of crime. A lot of brothers in the hood feel like, you know what, I got to go make ends meet. So they start going to do illegal things to put food on the table.
yes, position to fail. Position to fail. You know, I wanted to look at Martin Luther King through Coretta Scott King's eyes. So
Explain that.
So I went and I went to her a number of years, and finally I got her to sell me the rights to her life story because I wanted to look at Martin through her eyes. I felt like she's the one that knew him better than anybody. I felt like Coretta is the true queen of America because she's the one who was with him through the civil rights movement. She's the one who raised their 4 children. She's the one who raised over $50 million to build the Martin Luther King Center for Nonviolent Change. And she is the one who made Martin Luther King's birthday a national holiday, the only American to have his birthday as a national holiday.
And she sued the government.
She shoot, yes, and I'm
People- a lot
making a
of people
movie.
don't know that.
I'm making a movie about that. I'm making a movie about that.
And one.
Yes, and one. I'm making a movie about that, which is going to change everybody's perspective. And I learned so much from her, and she taught me so much. I'll never forget. She said to me, Byron, as black people, we have 4 major challenges. Number 1, end slavery. Number 2, end Jim Crow. Now, Jim Crow, in my opinion, was more damaging than slavery, because as slaves, we were property. We were an asset, and when we became free, we became a liability. And that's when they introduced Jim Crow. I need to murder you. I need to lynch you. I need to incarcerate you because you are competing with me. End Jim Crow. And then she said, achieve, number 3, achieve civil rights. And then she choked up. And the next thing she said pretty much changed the way I looked at the world. She said, the real reason they killed my Martin, achieve economic inclusion.
That's right. The Poor People's March.
That's it.
Poor People's Movement.
That's it. She said, they didn't kill my Martin over I Have a Dream. They killed my Martin over the speech, The Other America.
That's right.
That's the speech. That's the speech everybody needs to know innately. There are 2 Americas. One America has opportunity and access to capital and education. And what does it matter if I can sit at the same lunch counter as my white counterpart and I cannot afford the same hamburger?
That's right.
There are 2 Americas, and 2 Americas will not survive. That's why they killed him, the Poor People's March. He was going to deliver 500,000 poor people, mainly poor white people.
Yeah, of all races. That would have been a game changer.
That was the game changer.
Yeah.
He was delivering over 500,000 poor people to the nation's capital. And the government said, hey, this guy's a threat to national security. And we're making a movie about this, that they gave the orders to kill him.
Yeah.
And
Have you ever read William Pepper's book, his lawyer?
That's the book I bought.
Oh.
Orders to Kill.
Orders
So
to Kill.
we're making, that's the reason I got in the movie business, to tell that story and other stories like it. So, and that's why we are the first movie studio to go direct to the movie theaters. And we deal directly with the theaters. So when she told me that, it really changed everything. And I said, you and Martin have done an amazing job. I said, the 4th and final chapter, this generation will deal with it. You guys took care of the first 3, and now it's time for us to deal with that 4th chapter, economic inclusion. And I never forgot, she said, they will come after you. They will come after you.
They're kind of coming after you now, right?
They always come after me.
Yeah.
But listen, people always, I've made it very clear, do not live in fear. You cannot live in fear. I burnt my knee pads long ago. A lot of brothers. Yeah. So a lot of brothers say to me, they gonna blackball you. They gonna blackball you. And I'm like, hey, when your black ass was born, they blackballed you. You just didn't get the email. You were born blackballed. You know, you've been positioned to fail, and you have to recognize where you are. You know, and it took a lot for me to start to see what was going on. Having kids, you know, taking my kids to school, taking my daughter Chloe to school when she was 2 or 3 years old, and she's in the back seat, and my other daughter Olivia, and my son Lucas wasn't born at the time, and my daughter Chloe started counting and telling me all the homeless people she was seeing out on the streets. Daddy, I see another homeless person. Daddy, I see another homeless person. Daddy, when are we going to stop to help them? How come we're not helping them, Daddy? 3 years old. And by the time I got to the next light, I started crying. I started crying because I realized I had turned off my empathy button.
Right.
And this little girl.
It was normalized.
It was normalized. That's right. You got it. And this little girl turned that empathy button back on. And what was it about me that I was going to act like I don't see you? And I said, yeah, you know what? We are going to help them. What's going on here? There's a matrix that's happening here, and we're going to crack the code. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I said, you know what? It's the 4 Ds. It's the 4 Ds.
What are the 4 Ds?
They dismiss you. It was perfected on women hundreds of years ago. Just dismiss you. Hey, you know what? I'm not getting a fair shake here. I'm just going. They just dismiss you. Then then you get a little upset about being dismissed, and you say, no, this is real. We have to really get this on track. Then they discredit you. Oh, look at that. Okay. And then you get really a little louder, a little bit more aggressive, not in a bad way, but like, we have to really deal with this. Then they move on to that 3rd D, and they have to move on to that 3rd D to get right with their Christian selves. They demonize you. And then once they hit that 3rd D and they demonize you, they have a green light to go to that inevitable 4th D, destroy you.
Right.
So it's dismiss, discredit, demonize, destroy. And I watched and I looked at it and I said, wow, what is going on here? And I said, you know, we are positioned to fail because of the nature of how we came into this country. We were brought here to create wealth, not to share the wealth. And you're brought here to build wealth, to make people wealthy, not to share it. And the moment we became free, we became a liability to them. And that's when they kicked in and said, here you go. I'm going to incarcerate you. And I say, listen, they get us in the schoolroom by making sure you don't get a proper education.
Right.
They get you in the boardroom by making sure you don't have access to capital that's not predatory and business opportunities. And they get you in the courtroom by making sure there are laws that incarcerate you and lock you up long before you get choked to death in the streets.
Now, how did you get the capital for a lot of the stuff that you did? Because, like you said, they don't give us anything. How were you able to get that mind frame and have that business mind frame to purchase and do some of the moves that you were able to do?
Like, how you pivot from artist to executive?
You know, from watching that, understanding this, you have to understand where you are, understanding how you're positioned to fail. If you don't understand, if you don't get into that matrix, then you can't go to the next level. So I said, okay, how do we get around that? You know, when you look at an Eric Garner getting choked to death in the streets, right? They didn't position him properly in the schoolroom to have that education so he can have access to that capital. So he wasn't standing on the sidewalk, but rather he owned the block. He owned the store in which he was standing in front of. How does that happen? Where he gets choked to death. It's happening. The battle is not in the streets. It's in the schoolroom. It's making sure we get a proper education.
Right.
It's in the boardroom, making sure you have access to capital that's not predatory. And it's in the courtroom, like we are in the Supreme Court. We'll talk a little bit about that. And this was something that, you know, I started supporting Senator Obama long before Black America or anybody knew his name, right? Because he came to folks who had the capital to support. I was happy to support. And after he became president, I said, I'm not I'm not any different than anybody else. I have an agenda. My agenda is that I want for all Americans to have equal access to capital and opportunity, especially African Americans, the furthest left behind. So I said, I have two asks of you. I said, you just spent $700 billion to bail out the banks. And I want you to audit the banks and see if they're lending money to black people. Not minorities, black people. Because minorities, that's defined as white women.
Yes.
And the new minorities, gay white men. But if you actually say, I'm going to audit you to see if you're lending money to black people, Negroes, whichever decade you want to go to, you're going to see that we're not getting access to capital. And at that point, I had seen the data that unemployment for under Obama's administration, unemployment for black America had gone up and had gone down for white America, and home ownership had hit a 25-year low. So I said that audit will send a very clear message to the banks to start lending money to black folks, and they'll start digging black people up out of graves and lending money to maintain their good standing with the United States government.
So
and I
you
said,
got a loan.
No. So
Okay.
I went to him, and that was the other thing. And I said, listen, the other thing I want you to do is just understand that the United States government has over $1 trillion pension fund, over a T, government worker pension fund money. People who work for the government, over $1 trillion. Not one penny of that is managed by African Americans.
Wow.
And I just need you to make sure that, maybe 150 billion is in the hands of qualified African American money managers, because that's going to be invested in African American entrepreneurs in our communities, and that will create jobs in our community, and we can start to address the economic genocide by making sure you don't have access to a proper education, making sure you don't have access to capital. That equals genocide. I'm going to squeeze you out. I'm going to take the oxygen out of the room. I'm going to position you to fail. You don't have a proper education. You don't have access to capital. That's not predatory. You don't have opportunities. So I said those two things will change the game. Just notify the banks. I'm going to give you a report card on black people and carving out about $150 billion of government worker pension fund money, a lot of it coming from people of color. And that did not happen, but that was my ask.
You
And
sounded like Barack just now. That did not happen.
that did not happen.
Well, why didn't that happen?
I honestly think we as a people, we were not clear in our ask, and we didn't hold him and others accountable.
A lot of people say that now. A lot of people feel like we just were so happy that we had
A beautiful
black
black
person in the
family,
White House,
and that's
that
it.
we didn't ask for nothing. There was no democracy that came behind it.
We didn't have an
anything.
ask. We weren't, look, other communities were brilliant, and they had an ask, and they got results. We weren't clear in our ask. I was clear in my ask, and I said, this is what I need for black America. I need economic inclusion. We need to address the fourth and final chapter, and ultimately that's what's going to make America better, is that everybody is fully, maximizing their potential. We
Can I
have
ask
to.
you about higher
You
education?
still ain't
and-
tell us how you got the money, though.
Oh, how I got? Oh, you want to? You want to? Okay.
How you got the money? Comedian, writing jokes.
Yes, to getting the money.
Get able to buy the
Weather Channel.
Rio.
He's trying to get all of y'all money.
How'd you get the money,
You took us on
Byron?
tour, but you ain't take us to the.
Okay, my money's easy. My money's easy. Like I said, I had to learn how to make money from the day I started saying, look, I'm going to help my mother. I'm going to make sure I'm not a burden.
Right.
That's the easy part. Making money is easy. And that's a mindset. You could put up a radar and say, where's trouble, and trouble will find you. You could put up a radar and say, where's this, and it will come to you. But when you put up that radar that says, okay, how are we going to make money in an honest way, in a legal way, you're going to figure it out, especially today
Yes.
with the internet.
Yeah, but
with
300 million to buy the Weather Channel.
300, by the way, 300 million is not a lot of money. And so I think
Okay, what kind of billions Byron working with? Let me get 300 million. Yeah, let me get 50 then.
Just give me 10.
10. I listen. 300 million. I want to make sure everybody understands how much money there is out there, and it is there for you. That money is there for you, and you can make all that and more. That money's there, especially today. I mean, look, in America, this is the greatest financial system out there. We have over $20 trillion in liquidity in our financial systems. That money is just swirling, looking for a place to invest and looking for a place to get a safe return. That money's available to you. That money's looking for you. And there aren't that many people who can actually invest it, protect it, return it with a return. So there's plenty of capital. There's no shortage of capital in America.
How do you get it, though?
Great question. All right, so let's talk about it.
All right, we're listening.
All right, well, let's talk about it. Then we got to go back a little bit.
Okay.
Because I want everybody to understand it innately, because I want everybody out there to be a billionaire. And
I like when you talk like that. Go ahead.
I want everybody
to be a
It's like-
billionaire.
I want everybody to be a billionaire, okay?
Let's talk, Billion Allen.
Because, by the way, God wants you to be that too, wants you to be your best. So I'm here to help.
All right.
So let's talk about it. I started my company from my dining room table in 93. And I did a television special where I interviewed a bunch of funny friends.
I remember that.
Right? So a weekly 1-hour show called Entertainers with Byron Allen.
Yep.
And I sat at my dining room table and I called all 1,300 television stations and asked them to carry the show for free. And on average, they all told me no about 50 times. And literally, I sat at my dining room table from sunup to sundown, and I got about 50,000 no's. And after a year of doing that, I was able to squeeze out about 150 yeses. I got a TV station in every market from New York to Waterloo, Iowa, right? And so that was my lineup. Now, Tribune had said to me, Byron, if you get 75% of the country, we will sell your commercial time, because I said to the TV stations, there's 14 minutes of commercial time. I'll keep 7 minutes. You keep 7 minutes. I'll sell my 7 minutes to national advertisers. You, local TV station, you sell your 7 minutes to local advertisers.
Smart.
Right? You sell it to local banks, car dealers, supermarkets. I'll sell my 7 minutes
Right.
to McDonald's and Pepsi and Johnson & Johnson and General Motors. You sell yours to the local,
And
sport.
they didn't pay for the show. You paid to get everything
That's right.
done.
They didn't pay for the show. I gave them the show for free.
You produced the show, did everything yourself.
Everything myself. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. Sat there for 1 year and just worked the phones like crazy for 1 year. The hardest thing I've ever done. Give away a TV show for free.
Right.
So now the problem was, after I did that, good old Tribune said, we changed our mind. We're not going to give you an advance of $400,000 so you can go into production and produce this TV show. So I said, okay, I'm not going to sit here for 1 year and tell these TV stations I'm not going to deliver what I told you I would deliver. So I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. And I decided I'm going forward. And I went forward. I didn't know how I was going to get it done. But Martin Luther King, like he said, that's faith, taking that step
Taking
when I
the
was
first step when you don't see the rest of the staircase.
and the rest of the staircase. There it is, right? So I went forward, and it was tough. My home went in and out of foreclosure over 14 times over about a 4 or 5 year period.
Went from bankruptcy to billionaire.
From bankruptcy to billionaire. That's exactly right. There was there were days I didn't eat. There were days they turned my phone off, and this is before mobile phones. I was calling people from a pay phone. And I got to know the lady really well at the bank, and I'll never forget her. She says, your file keeps coming on my desk. She says, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm not paying my mortgage because I'm paying the cameraman, and I'm paying the sound person, and I'm paying to get tape, and I'm paying to have my show edited, and I'm paying to put it on the satellite, and I'm just trying to put a show in production. I don't have the money to do it. And she says, listen up, honey. She says, don't let it go past day 89, because day 89, day 90, it goes to the lady next to me, Agnes, and you don't want your file to go to her desk.
Right.
That's just a mean name.
Agnes is not as nice as me.
Yeah, white women named Agnes don't play no game.
So I said day 89, and that was it. And I showed up every day on the 89th day, and I paid my mortgage, but I was floating. And finally, I turned the corner, and I signed up all the movie studios to buy advertising. Before that, I was selling 1-800 spray on hair. And after I got the movie studios,
Okay, Envy.
yeah, it is.
He just got his.
This is real.
That's real.
He just got his.
Oh, you just got his. That's spray on there.
It's not spray on, it's plug-in.
It's plug-in.
Yeah,
Not no
plug-in.
damn plug-in. Let the man
We
finish.
would love
It
to
looks
get him
good,
on
man.
the
It looks good. I mean, that's
Thanks,
one.
Byron.
Thank you. I probably got $20 for that can.
Thanks,
so
Byron.
then,
This is real.
oh, is that real?
thanks,
Okay.
Byron.
Oh, you still got the spray on.
Oh, we sell it to everybody, right?
Yeah.
So we kept selling, and I got movie studios, and I said I'm gonna go to soft drinks. I got soft drinks, and I went to fast foods, and I went to packaged goods, and I went to pharmaceuticals, and I went to automotive, and I went industry by industry by industry, and I went to board of directors, and I went to CEOs and chief
And
marketers.
this was you. This was not
me.
an assistant. This was
This
not
is
a
me.
friend. This
I'm
is
on the
you
phone.
pitching
Me,
yourself.
I'm going day and night. I'm on the plane every night. And I'm 6 meetings a day, whatever it is. And finally, I put another show on. I said, I know all these television stations. I know all these advertisers. I put another show on, another show. Next thing you know, I have 43 shows on the air. One of the largest privately held libraries in the world. And I went to Verizon. I said, look, I want to launch 10 networks with you. They said, we won't give you 10. We'll give you 6. We launched 6 24-hour HD networks. I went back a few years later and said I got a 7th network. We launched a 7th network because we ended up being one of the largest producers of court shows. We launched a 7th network. And then a buddy came to me, and a guy who's satellited my networks. Success begets success. And he came to me and he said, can we have dinner? And I said, sure. And we sat down. He says, you don't realize this. Before I was the CEO of this satellite company that satellites our networks, he said, I used to be the chief operating officer of the Weather Channel. And he said, you should buy the Weather Channel. He goes, I know you don't think about the Weather Channel in LA because it's always 80 degrees and sunny, but it's a great business and it generates hundreds of millions of dollars. And the people who own it just don't want to own it anymore because they're in a partnership, a 3-way partnership. It's Bain, it's Blackstone, and it's NBC Universal. And they want to get out of the deal. And I said, okay. And he started talking about it. And I said, okay, let me get into it. We got into it. And I said, you know what? I'm going to buy the Weather Channel. And I called a guy up and I said, we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to buy the Weather Channel. And I said, it generates quite a bit of capital. And I need $310 million.
Oh, so you didn't use your own money?
I didn't use my own money.
Oh, okay.
I borrowed it.
Okay.
So the guy, I called him on a Friday morning.
You got his number? I like
Yeah,
his number.
call him. Yeah, I'll get you his number. And by the way, and here's what I knew. He has $100 billion that he manages. So when you have $100 billion that you manage, you have a problem. You have $100 billion that you must shepherd, invest, and get back with a return.
Right. You
So when
have
I-
to do something with that money.
You got to do something with
invest
it.
it, right.
There it is. So I said, look, I'm here to help. You got $100 billion. I'm here to help you unload some of that, put it somewhere, and get that return. I'm an asset. Called him on a Friday morning. He sent his top executive to see me the next business day, Monday at 2:00. Sat in my conference room for 4 hours. He said, this is one of the most amazing business stories I've ever heard. You are a brilliant entrepreneur. I'm going to give you a commitment letter, a term sheet tonight, and a commitment letter tomorrow morning. Please close on the Weather Channel. And we did.